All right. If you have any questions that pop up along the way, then I'm not gonna see them because that would distract me and then I lose my flow. But so you don't forget them. If there is any that happen to pop up, just add them when they happen to pop up and I'll circle back at the end and answer them. So share screen, where is my, give me 1 second, guys. No, close this. Maybe on that one. Okay, there it is. Okay. Why your body resists fat loss now and how to fix that. Okay. Oops. That was well, if I can't see it coming in at the time, then I can't stop. So, okay. There's another one. Okay. Why your body resists fat loss now and how to fix that. So, I'm going to try to do my best to explain this whole process of fat loss changing as you approach or go through midlife and perimenopause and menopause and whatnot. And the most common thing I could say that people relate to or resonate with is, and it's what I see in applications or emails, is that, hey, Eric, what used to work for me doesn't work anymore, right? So that's typically it because when people have had varying degrees of success in the past, and then things are automatically going to change once your hormones start to change. But that's kind of the first kind of frustration is that. Uh, Whether it be a low calorie diet or cutting carbs or any kind of anything extreme or not that you might have done in the past that produced results, at least temporarily, when you return to that, it just doesn't produce the same result, right? So it's not that the method changed, it's still the same method, but you changed, your body's changed, your response to that protocol has changed. So let me see if I can scroll this. Okay. So fat loss isn't just harder now, it's different. So you're not lazy, you're not crazy. Well, you actually could be. You could be lazy, you could be crazy, but you're not lazy in the sense that you're not doing enough and you're not crazy that it is actually a completely different type of response in your 40s. So you're just using the wrong playbook for the body you have now. So let's fix that. Tonight's goal is to explain why fat loss, one, gets harder in midlife, two, break down the role of stress, hormones, perimenopause, and diet history, which is the one that most people don't actually really consider in this process. Show how to restore fat loss responsiveness, and then introduce you to the system we've used to do exactly that for hundreds of women in Look Like You Train. So the game changed, but nobody told you. So it's not just that your body is older, it's that it's also had more time dieting, uh, under eating, restricting, so on and so forth. And these things tend to have a wear and tear effect. So if you think of like the things that happen to people in middle age when they get diagnoses and stuff, uh, lifestyle diagnosis, whether it be diabetes or a blood pressure condition or anything like that, those things didn't just happen right then, like bumped your knee or got into an accident. They're like slow burns, right? They're slow kills. Metabolism is the exact same. So it adapts to every time you restrict calories or go into a calorie deficit, your body sees it as under eating and your body's going to adapt to that. Everybody has a dieting history at this point. Anybody who's following a fitness page has some degree of effort in the past where they've attempted to lose weight. So do it one time, you have a dieting history, so it applies because some people can withstand pretty extreme approaches and not have this metabolic response that comes from too much weight loss efforts, and some people can't, right? So you have more adaptation to the frequency of the times that you've tried to lose weight. Your body is now more sensitive in your 40s, which we'll talk about. And the sensitivity also makes it more defensive to fat loss. So this is, when I basically years of chasing fat loss has left a mark. So there's just always kind of wear and tear that's not undone. So if you think about all the amount of times that you've actually tried to lose fat, you consciously go into a calorie deficit, right? You consciously follow a plan, you consciously restrict to some degree. And then when you're done that, you're done, right? You return to whatever the eating is that you were doing typically because the approach used for the restriction time was not something you plan to do forever. So it's either on plan or off plan. And there's no plan to do the opposite of what the on plan was doing, which was restricting calories. So if there's no reversal of that, and there's no time eating the opposite, more food, then that adaptation just continues to go down and down and down and down. So by the time you're getting to the point in your life where things are automatically changing anyways because of this menopausal transition, you also have metabolic wear and tear and the stress sensitivity that comes from the dieting history, which is what no one considers. So when people go into their 40s and they're thinking perimenopause, menopause, hormones, it's not that only. It's the dieting history on top of that that compounds the issue. Because those that have the most colorful dieting history tend to have the most symptomatic or troublesome run through perimenopause. Competitors would be a great example. They've done, in some cases, some wildly restrictive and extreme approaches to fat loss, right? And they tend to be rather symptomatic during perimenopause. So hormonal shifts have lowered your margin for error. What this means is essentially that, especially from a nutrition standpoint, like you have less room for error. It requires some structure, some actual plan, and something to follow because the kind of eat healthy or just eat clean or eat this or eat not that, it's healthy, but it's not a plan. There's nothing that you can do with that when something stops working or you hit a plateau because your body is more sensitive to how many times you diet, how low your calories are, so extreme calorie deficits, how long you're dieting. All of these things become things that your body is way more sensitive to. So if you were to poll the average person, the average person is under eating and they don't realize on a daily basis, on a consistent basis. Then you have your spikes when you have higher calorie times, but the average person, the average woman in their 40s is under eating on a chronic level. So whether that be intentional or just because of poor planning and busy times and not prioritizing self, it's an under eating situation, which is compounding all the issues going on right now. So essentially, you have a body that's just defensive, right? It's just defensive. So lots of activation, lots of stress in the body, not enough fuel, not enough recovery, plus the natural hormonal shifts that are happening anyways as you approach menopause, right? So you have way more stress in the body. You have less stress resilience, which has your body on the defensive. So the first thing that you notice, I don't know if I did, if I put this in here. Hang on, let me just, I did. Okay, so I won't stop here. The same workouts, diets, and fixes now backfire because your physiology isn't the same. So what this means is that it's not that what you're doing when you say what I was doing, what used to work no longer works. So therefore it's a net zero. It's just doing nothing. It's a backfire. It's actually compounding the issue and pushing you in the exact opposite direction than you're trying to go. So it's actually not a net zero. It's a stress, hormone, and history issue. And again, the dieting history component is the one that most people aren't considering. So if you dieted for years, that alone changes things. Your metabolism is more defensive by default because there hasn't been an equal amount of time, at least doing the opposite of under eating. How your body handles food changes, how it reacts to training changes, how it reacts to stress changes, how it protects fat. These things all change the more you've dieted. So you could have a person who is not in the mid 40s transition, perimenopausal, menopausal transition, but has a wild dieting history that would have the same kind of like hormonal setup or not setup, but look on blood work as a person who was, say, a contest prep dieter because the same stress is happening in the body. So when you consider that all these hormones are connected, so if you're looking at thyroid, you can't just look at the thyroid because if you're looking at thyroid, then every other system is interacting with that and is affected too, right? So the common denominator is the stress component. So when that dial is turned up, then all these other systems are affected. And that's the main point. So when you look at, say, I'm not able to lose weight, nothing's working right now, that's a problem I need to solve. It's not the only change that a person that you've noticed, right? There's other symptoms that you would notice about hormone changes, whether that be brain fog or, digestive issues, sleep, temperature dysregulation, any of these mid 40s symptoms, they all coincide with these changes in body fat. So maybe you didn't notice a lot of weight gain, but you notice a redistribution in where you hold fat, right? It's more on your abdomen in the belly, right? But that didn't happen by itself. And this is important because you can come in and then try to say, I'm trying to solve this fat loss issue, and then put all the eggs into the fat loss basket and find yourself pulled back into things that worked previously for you with fat loss, not realizing that's a symptom, just like these other things are symptoms, and they all have a common problem. And therefore, if you can identify that difference and put all the efforts, whether that be training or not, whether including training, nutrition, recovery, everything you're doing towards the actual problem, all those symptoms then improve, right? When the physiology is more in alignment and less stressed and less defensive, it works properly. So you have these inputs, whether they be diet and training, and you have expected outputs, fat loss, feeling better, good sleep, energy, and you have you in the middle, right? The processing unit, the metabolism. If this system is defensive and stressed and just not functioning the way it optimally wants to function, and you can tell because it doesn't feel the same, well, it's not going to produce the same outputs logically, right? So we can't even expect that until this is addressed, and that stress reactivity, that inability to handle those inputs the same way is improved. So why this happens, it's not just that you're older, you're also hormonally and metabolically different. So the first thing that happens, whether it is from a lot of dieting or whether it's from the beginning of perimenopause, is progesterone goes down. This is the first change, right? And once you lose this progesterone estrogen balance, when you get blood work, there's a progesterone estrogen ratio test, right? This is when someone can say is the wrong word, suggest, I guess, that there's an estrogen dominant issue or something like that. But ultimately, these hormones have a balance between themselves that is ideal. And when it's stable, you have really good buffer against stress, right? You defend well against stress. So when this changes naturally in perimenopause, you lose that buffer naturally. And now you're exposed to the higher stress in your system, which changes where you're holding body fat, right? Higher stress, higher cortisol affects insulin resistance, slides, and that produces more of a preference for fat in the middle. So less stress protection, obviously poorer sleep, which is why when you get on HRT and you start taking progesterone, it helps your sleep. Less recovery. So progesterone is like your nurture, recovery, slow, take care of things type of hormone. So higher cortisol, more belly fat, increased cravings, makes it really hard to be consistent when and again, this is at the top of the dial. So it's not so much that this could be elevated and then you lose this progesterone estrogen balance. And this is the first change you notice. It's also why men carry fat in the tummies more than women do, because we don't have the defense of having the estrogen progesterone defense. And then when you guys go through perimenopause, you become more like men and hold fat in your stomachs. So obviously poor sleep, harder time relaxing with high stress. And then as you pass through this time and head more towards menopause, then estrogen starts to generally drop. So early perimenopause, progesterone is dropping, estrogen is fluctuating, and then estrogen starts to systematically drop and not fluctuate as much towards menopause. So this is also going to contribute to more of a change in fat distribution, which so lower estrogen, more visceral fat, lower insulin sensitivity. So you're not handling carbohydrates as well. So take somebody who's not training properly, who's not using their muscles in an efficient way, which is really the key to insulin sensitivity and walking, they're not going to have that counterbalance to the loss in estrogen. So the exercise component becomes really important as you get older because this is a diabetic slide, right? So if you look at type 2 diabetes, it's lifestyle controlled. They're not on any kind of insulin, they're on insulin sensitizers. You can really help that through diet. You can help that through training. You can help that through movement in general. This is the same thing. So this is the slide that's naturally happening anyways. Lower resilience to change. So smaller stressors now hit harder. So say when you have a good healthy balance of sex hormones, you might have something that, let's say there was a 1 to 10 stress scale, it maybe you would rate it a 4. Now that feels like a 7. So it's the same thing with calorie deficits. The way your body treats that is more sensitive. So you have to spend less time in them, have not so extreme of a deficit and not so frequent of deficits, and have intentional times not doing that. And you really have to see this through the lens of permanent results, right? Not just like, I'm here to fix this problem and, you know, that's it, right? I mean, I get it. That is it. That's kind of the start to it. But your goal is really to maintain long term. The win is doing it forever, right? Like not quitting. So anybody who's in shape, who's had to work to get there, is still working to stay there. So you have to have a system that kind of serves the process long term. And if you can't do it for, like, if it's something that you're grinding or white knuckling through, it's not going to last, right? So that kind of ties back into, Amy's talk yesterday on our approach to nutrition. That's like all these different methods work. Tracking macros works, hardcore dieting works, everything works if you stick to it and it's a calorie deficit. That's not the issue. The issue is what do you do long term? And therefore, then you need to have a system that serves the sustainability requirement that each of us has, right? That's super important. So these things as well, when you look at it, it's not, I said in here somewhere, it's not um, you know, an easier approach or a softer approach. It's a more effective approach. And in a lot of senses, it's a lot harder because you have the draw from the past to the push, work the fat off, burn the calories, go, go, go. And you can do that when you have the resilience against that, but you don't, right? It actually is totally counterproductive and it increases the stress on an already stressed system. So you can, and here's the thing, you see a lot on social media when people talk about, cortisol and stress, and you can't lose fat because of this, or I even see, what was it? I have to ask Amy, fat pathway blocks or something like that. You can lose fat when all of these things are happening. When your hormones are all jacked up and out of balance, you can totally lose fat. It's just way harder. And it's way harder because it's super hard to be consistent when these things are bouncing around all over the place because it affects how you feel. It affects your mood. It affects your hunger. It affects your cravings. It affects when these things hit you. It affects all of these things that make actual compliance to a program much harder. Now, if you can grind it out, sure, then you're going to lose fat anyways. Like there's no hormonal counter to an actual calorie deficit. The issue though is you can eat what you think is a calorie deficit, right? Input, but your body doesn't have to treat it that way. You can have adaptation, you could have anything, any number of things happening there. You can have a really wild dieting history that just lowers your calorie requirements over time. So, in theory, well, this should be a calorie deficit. I should be losing fat, but in actuality, it obviously isn't because I'm not. So, those are, things to think about too. So, more stress from life and lifestyle amplifies all of the above. So, all of these changes. But again, they don't stop fat loss, which is why also when you get on HRT, it doesn't actually solve any fat loss issues either. It just makes you feel better. And when you feel better, it's easier to do the work. It's easier to be consistent when you don't have these things wildly fluctuating. And when you get these things right, it is the first thing you notice because the symptoms and the fluctuations are all from the instability in the hormones. So when you think of like your cycle, that's like a mini menopause every time. And what happens? All these hormones bounce around. It affects your mood, your hunger, your cravings, your energy, all these things, right? On a rhythmic cycle, ideally. And oh, sorry, I just brain fart there. Um, Oh, I just lost my train of thought. Crap. I'm going to keep going anyways. What was I going to say there?
You said something about having many menopause cycles. and
Oh
these
yeah.
hormonal
So like,
shifts.
right, that's good. Thank you. So though that hormone instability is something that you experience on a monthly basis, and that's also associated with all these different symptoms. So when you are able to stabilize these hormones, and you can only stabilize what's left really, then you are able to also reduce those symptoms because that's the connection. And that's always the first thing that people will notice anyways when you start to get it right. We'll talk about that with biofeedback. Um, but anyways, these shifts create a body that's more reactive, less responsive, and more protective, and fat loss feels harder because biologically it is. Not impossible, but harder. Why stress physiology matters. So it's not just a hormonal issue, it's a lot of nervous system regulation. So it's this activated system, this overwound up. And again, one, it's going to happen naturally as the hormones naturally change through 40s and so on and so forth. It's potentiated more so if you have a fitness background or a dieting history that's not been kind of counter lifestyled as well. Um, and then these changes also just stress your system out. So you have what's generally called sympathetic dominant. So everybody knows this term as fight or flight, and this is the activated state, the hard to calm down type of state. So, and then you have the other side of it, which is the uh, rest and digest, the peaceful, slow down, parasympathetic side. So you see these as a seesaw, right? And ideally, you have activation when you want it. Training activates it, like fight or flight, right? Energy, activation, movement, alertness. It's supposed to go up. But then it balances out, right? In nature, you see a deer and a lion, that deer will go into that fight or flight, but they can naturally then be in safety and completely just be oblivious and graze, right? They go into parasympathetic. That's the issue is that what happens is we get stuck on the one side, right? We get stuck with too much weight on the stress side and we have a very reactive system in our 40s and then we're still doing, you know, hit or boot camps or high intensity calorie burning classes or workouts that are fine in and of themselves in a not overstressed physiology state. But in that context, they just push it up even higher. So when your body spends too much time in this state, so you're not having time to kind of close the loops, fat loss takes a back seat. Like physiologically, fat loss takes a back seat. If you were the deer and you were always running and never getting to stop, then digestion takes a back seat, reproduction takes a back seat, fat loss, it takes a back seat. These things are not priorities in this caught in fight or flight state, right? So then the hormones and all these systems are deprioritized to prioritize emergency systems. This is what happens to humans. We get stuck in that state already. Women, when hormones are already changing, are extra sensitive to these types of changes. So those types of workouts um, are no longer productive. They're counterproductive because they're adding activation to an already activated state. So symptoms of this type of activation is poor digestion, which makes sense, right? The parasympathetic side is the rest and digest side. If you're always on this side if the seesaw's always weighted here and digestion's here, there's just not going to have good digestion. Low recovery sleep, maybe um, long latency, long time to fall asleep, inability to stay asleep, lots of cravings, energy crashes, harder to stay consistent. It's just harder to stay consistent. When you have your body in a more predictable rhythmic state, then you don't have as many cravings. You don't have as much, fluctuations in hunger. These things stabilize because the hormones that govern them stabilize as well. So you're not going to have control over things like progesterone and estrogen as your ovaries wind down, uh, obviously, but you do still have impact on the stress hormones, right? Which then are affecting other systems downstream that impact your ability to be consistent, namely hunger, cravings, sleep recovery, digestion, thyroid, insulin sensitivity. All of these things are still affected and things that you can still impact even while sex hormones are declining. Slower recovery from workouts, less overall parasympathetic activation. This is your peace mode, right? This is where you want to be before bed, parasympathetic. When your system is overwhelmed, it doesn't adapt, it defends. That means holding on to body fat. Again, you can push into that, but it prefers to hold on to body fat. Your body does not want to release energy when you're in fight or flight because you need quickly available energy. You need an abundance of energy in that state. So your body is going to always want to fuel up in a crisis. Lots of stress, what do? You eat. Or unless you're the type of person who, that acute stress that affects your tummy where you can't eat, that's different. But generally speaking, overwhelming stuff causes people to make poor eating decisions. Um, Resisting muscle growth because of the poor recovery, the hormone alignment is just not there, and fat loss is just biologically more difficult. Again, not impossible, it's just way, way, way uphill. The old method backfires in this environment. When stress in the body is already high and your nervous system is overloaded, traditional fat loss, call them under 40 tactics, make things worse. So this is the high intensity stuff, cardio, boot camps, any kind of calorie burning mindset. And this is really the wrong mindset anyways. Fat burning workouts. These were never the right tool. The gym isn't for burning calories. If you could just flip the script on this and not see the gym as a place to burn calories ever again, it will do you a world of good and move you so much more in the direction of how you probably want to look like over time. Amy and I have three girls, all of our kids train, but they will never see the gym that way. They see the gym as a place to get strong, hit PRs, build muscle, get jacked in their way, whatever that means. And that's how, and that serves you, that serves them. That's the way to see it. The gym is not for that. And even if it was for that, not for that, even if it was effective for that before, which a lot of people will say, hey, my work, it's essentially when I get a lot of these questions, they mention only workouts, never mention food. It's these workouts. And I'm like, what about your food? But anyways, you know, a lot of people can associate prior success with these methods and they can be fun and stuff like that. And that's a different topic entirely. But if you're trying to produce an outcome in your body, these are not just not effective, they are counterproductive. They increase already elevated stress hormones even higher. Again, if you're not in that state where they do, where you're in this kind of reactive state, they're fine. I have clients that are under 40, they can do interval training. I'll program it, no big deal. But that's a different state. So the context always matters. It's the same thing with low carb, low calorie, intermittent fasting types of approaches to provide the glucose in that blood because your body still needs it. Even if you're not eating it, it will produce it from other things, right? From protein, et cetera, from the low amount of carbohydrates you eat. You still need a degree of blood sugar stability for your body. Otherwise, it's a stress to it's an emergency to your body, right? Crash. What does that? Cortisol does that, right? That's the job of cortisol. So this is also why people wake up at 3 in the morning a lot of times because blood sugar is dipping, and that's an emergency response. Your body sends that message to the hormones that can provide the gap, the sugar gap, provide the sugar. That's cortisol, which when that passes a certain baseline, you wake up, right? It's a wake up hormone. It's an alert hormone. So that's blood sugar instability there. So any of these, low carbohydrate diets, intermittent fasting, where your body has to provide the gap, are going to raise a hormone that you're really trying to relax. So it just logically doesn't make a lot of sense to take that approach, right? Carbohydrates are really a great friend during this time, not an enemy at all. So any of the low carbohydrate, it doesn't even matter if you've had success with it in the past. It's just not productive. Um, or helpful um, during perimenopause, during your 40s. Carbohydrates become really, really important. Not as important as having good protein intake, of course, but they're right there with protein. Um, meal skipping is terrible because you have no regulation and no uh, predictability for your body, which we'll talk about in terms of hunger hormones and blood sugar stability. So there's this dysregulation, and that's not safe for your body. That's not a safe place for your body to be. So it becomes reactive, it becomes defensive, it's not responsive and relaxed. Same thing with low calorie diets. They're not sustainable. So again, think of the process of what we're trying to do here. We want to lose fat in a way that we can do long term, but eating more, right? Calorie deficit, but sustainable meals that I like, not calorie deficit forever, but still sustainable meals that I like. Going super low calories, usually those are not, there's not enough oomph to the meals to even make them to be sustainable meals, right? So increase hunger, craving, stress, and the speed of metabolic adaptation. Um, these tactics worked before because your body could handle the pressure. Now they're just adding to the mess. A stressed body isn't inefficient, it's protective. So what does work now? Lower the stress load from training, food, and life, restore metabolic stability and rhythm. Um, Metabolic stability and rhythm means uh, um, from a metabolic stability standpoint, it means that your body withstands the stress of undereating. So it adapts less fast. It's less defensive to calorie deficits, right? So you can see in some cases where somebody that is going into a calorie deficit, it becomes quite obvious their body is not going to be happy in that state, right? Their biofeedback starts to change. They start to feel like crap, so on and so forth. The hormone instability becomes obvious. So that's a lack of metabolic stability. And that's what happens when you have done a lot of dieting as well. Rhythm and predictability is really where your body is in a much more relaxed, calm, predictable state. And that's really where everything starts to be responsive. Strength training with purpose to preserve and rebuild muscle, not to burn calories. So to actually, on purpose, preserve and build muscle. Walk daily to drive recovery, regulate your hormones, and activate your parasympathetic system, which is again, your relaxation system. Eat enough and eat regularly to support biofeedback, blood sugar stability, and nervous system health. This isn't the easier approach, it's the effective one. It's not about eating less and moving more. It's about rebuilding a body that's ready and able to respond. So if you just see it through the stress lens, and stress equals defensive. I wrote something recently and I use a little dog as an analogy. If there was a dog and it was owned by an abusive dog owner who was really unkind to this dog, what happens to the dog's personality and its demeanor, its nervous system? That dog becomes highly alert, highly activated, highly defensive, really not the way it's designed to be, right? And then, so that is an unsafe place for that. That's an unsafe thing. That's how your metabolism is. And then, however, it becomes a dog lover's dog. They swap owners. Even when new dog owner is consistent, is loving, is doing all the right things, that dog is still defensive, is still reactive, is still untrusting, right? This is the exact same thing with metabolism. But eventually, it the predictability, the person's consistency in that behavior becomes predictable, right? It becomes rhythmic, it becomes routine, it becomes expected. And this is what that dog then loves because there's no surprises. I've come to expect this behavior. I can now relax. I'm not as in fear. I can trust. I can be myself, or I can actually just function the way I'm designed to function. Metabolism is exactly the same, right? So when it knows when it's eating, when it knows when it's resting, when it knows when it's training, when it knows when it's moving, this is predictability. So you look at um, menstrual cycles, the cortisol cycle throughout the day. These things all operate on an ideally predictable rhythm. If you eat at the same time every day, what happens? You tend to get hungry around those times. So you get to control where hunger starts to show up. You don't get caught with your pants down as much, between meals with this kind of raging hunger or cravings. Same thing with bedtimes and waking times. When they're predictable, you have much better rest because those sleep cycles are happening at the same times every night. Your body is upregulating hormones at the same times all the time because those same inputs are coming in, and there's just a regulation that happens. This is a body that is not on defense. It is not reactive. It is exactly where it wants to be, in routine, in rhythm, with structure, right? So this is when it becomes responsive, and this is what is the key to relaxing everything and bringing everything down, turning that stress dial down. So these systems that were, deprioritized because of the emergency state can now just take the strain off them and be more balanced and stabilized on a whole body level. So then these good inputs that are coming in to this body of yours is processing it properly the way we biologically expect it to, and then we get a more predictable output. Predictability, I'm always one. I think I'm one slide ahead every time. Geez, I've done this like 4 times now. Predictability rebuilds safety. Your body does not love pressure. It loves predictability. Ah, that's so funny I did this. It doesn't just need less stress, it needs more stability. When everything feels chaotic, your schedule, your sleep, your hormones, your system stops adapting and starts bracing. To get it back on your side, you need to send one message over and over. You're safe, you're supported, you can let go now. That happens through rhythm and predictability. So meals at predictable times, not skipped, not erratic. There's multiple benefits to that. One, just the hunger control. And this comes from the predictability because of the hormones that respond at predictable times then. One, there's the structure component of it, which is kind of the base of everything, with what Amy's talking about yesterday from a nutrition standpoint, it's structure. You have to have the structure before you can really learn to be flexible with it. There always has to be a baseline of structure. So meals at predictable times, that's the structure. Then you have to learn what flexibility looks like, but you always have to have that structure, not skipped, not erratic. So you then get predictable hunger. You then get more stable blood sugar, which has a better impact on overnight stability with blood sugar, which probably keeps you more likely to be asleep, to stay asleep. Workouts on a regular schedule, that doesn't necessarily mean the same time of day. It just means that you're not a random person. There's a routine, there's a predictability around your training. Daily walks, daily. This could be different times a day. For me, it's always in the morning, but your body expects to move, right? These things become habitual and then they become more automatic. There's less discipline required. You discipline yourself in the beginning, of course, but then you just get pulled into these directions because you have connected the dots between what you're experiencing from doing them. Once you realize what a daily restorative walk does for you, even if you don't like it in the beginning, but you just work yourself through it, you're like, okay, you can connect the dots to the benefits from it. You're like, okay, well, I'm not going to stop doing that. Once you realize what eating at set times in the day as much as possible can do for the regulation, the hunger, the cravings, the stability, that's the magic word. Once you connect the dots, you're like, why would I not do this? I'd be an idiot. I'm just being dumb not to do this. Right. So, bedtimes and wake up times, garden-like rituals. The more rhythm and predictability your body can rely on, the more responsive it becomes. So again, structure. Why we walk. It's not for fat burning. It's more of a fat loss enabler. We don't walk fast. It's not cardio walking. It's not pound the pavement. It's not about that. You do burn a little bit of calories, but that's like a side effect from the reason for it. And it should be purposely leisurely, gentle. It's a slow walk. I mean, the ultimate parasympathetic walk is a beach walk because everybody walks slow on a beach, right? Like Amy and I were on vacation. We're like, man, if we could just walk that slow, you're almost falling asleep when you're walking. So it's like, it lowers cortisol. 100% it does, right? It boosts insulin sensitivity. That movement is using up some of that blood sugar. It supports digestion because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that digestive side of things. A little walk after a meal does a lot. It helps with after eating glucose utilization. It helps with digestion activation, regulates your nervous system, activating the rest and digest mode. These things are all connected. All five of these things builds rhythm and routine, predictability your body craves. They are all connected under the same thing. Walks don't need to be long. They don't need to be hard. They shouldn't be hard, I should have said, and they shouldn't be fast. They need to be daily, gentle, and non-negotiable, like non-distraction. Like don't, and ideally, they're not like podcast walks, right? That's consumption. You're not even paying attention to anything. You're totally like when you're in that level of consumption. I'm not saying it's always bad, but for the purpose of what I'm saying here, for these nervous system regulation type walks, you just let your brain do what it wants to do. Otherwise, it's doing nothing but consuming. You're not even there. You're totally checked out to thinking or letting anything happen or processing or organizing the day. It just makes a difference. These are just connect to yourself walks. They make a big difference. Your body changes faster when it's recovering better. You don't make even from the gym, we talk about training here. You don't respond to training, you respond to recovery. You have to recover from your workouts before you can respond to your workouts. That's the way the super compensation process after a workout happens, anyways. Damage, recovery, super compensate, train again, right? That is the way it goes. So if you don't have good recovery, doesn't matter how hard you train, you're not going to be getting what, even if you're making progress, great, but you could be making more. So why do we strength train? The gym should not, I already said this. The gym should not be where you go to burn calories. It should be where you go to build muscle, strength, and the metabolic machinery that makes fat loss sustainable. Same thing before, as I said, when people have these diet history repetitions, where they don't have any counter time to eat more to rebuild their metabolism. There's probably, in most cases, some muscle loss with that fat loss, especially if you did it in, well, the way most people approach fat loss irresponsibly when they're younger, right? They're not training properly, they're not eating enough, they're looking for as fast as possible. This is the muscle loss triple threat, right? So really easy to lose muscle, really hard to gain it back. So the person gains the weight back. They're not gaining that muscle back at the rate they're gaining the weight back. It takes time to gain the muscle. So the metabolism is slower at the higher body weight, right? You have less of that metabolic machinery. And put this on repeat. And the way you, and then you can see how over time you end up with this slower and slower metabolism because you have gradually less and less muscle that's to sustain that metabolism, right? Not to mention, this starts to accelerate anyways once you're into your 40s and 50s when muscle loss accelerates, bone loss accelerates if you're not actively training for it. So we strength train for a reason, right? So it's where you protect your bone density, maintain insulin sensitivity, uh, and signals to your body, hold on to muscle, keep metabolism high, and stay resilient. Plus, plus at the end of the day, I mean, it's look like you train. Like you need to train properly if you want to have muscles. Muscles was what give your body shape, what gives you rounder shoulders, better butt, smaller waist because you got wider back. It's what gives you the contours. So all resistance training is good. And if a person wasn't training, then any resistance training is good. But there's a way to optimize building muscle, building strength, than just going to the gym to work out. It's kind of like, people that go to the gym just work out. It's kind of like just eating healthy and expecting to optimize fat loss. Who does that work for? It doesn't work for anybody actually, except for the people anything works for, lucky ones. It's like training. There's some people that go to the gym that, man, my friend, he's a dumb butt on training. He doesn't know nothing, but he's jacked, right? Like he's jacked. I hate him. So it's like I know everything about training and I'm not like him, but he doesn't know nothing. So it is what it is. For the most part, if a person is approaching the gym that randomly, well, look around most gyms. Most gyms are full of people who don't ever make any progress. They're lifting the same weights they've always lifted. They look the exact same. No one comments on them because like says, "Hey, you're looking like you're making progress or this or that," because they're not. It's just workouts. So there's enough to know about training these days in research and science to know what optimizes strength gains, muscle gains, so on and so forth. And then, so this kind of ties into look like you train, which I'll just mention at the end anyways, because our new round starts in like 2 weeks. But it's also why it just is such a wonderful hybrid because the way to optimize these goals, which is really kind of the long-term way of supporting the fat loss goal you really want, is through this lens. Uh, um, is that it coincides with the needs you have to have more recovery built into the plan, right? So um, if you approach training the way you would have when you were younger and you could train more or do a lot more volume or a lot of cardio or just a lot of, junk volume, body part splits, train 5 days a week, all these, those types of workouts. Fortunately, this is kind of what I'm getting at. Fortunately, we know from research, those are just not optimal workouts for the average person. So good, right? So we've learned that that's not optimal anyways, even if you could train that way. So the optimal training for muscle and strength is more recovery based anyways. It isn't so volume based, which is exactly what this population of person needs anyway. So it's like a perfect fit. So preserves and rebuilds muscle. We know this is your metabolic engine. You need to keep this, and you're losing it anyway. So when you're losing fat, you need to really think about the fact that when you're in the shape you want to be in, you want to be eating an appropriate amount of food for that body weight, not a low amount of food. Like that's less sustainable, right? You want to be eating the right amount of calories for that amount of for that body weight so that you can stay there long term and not be one of these people who is successful for a little while, and then not. So that requires you do everything you can to maintain or add to your muscle while you're doing this, right? You have to counter that, counterpunch that. That's the metabolic engine. We all generally know this, right? But I believe that most people don't just train properly for it, obviously. Improves insulin sensitivity. So, muscle insulin resistance. So, this is the opposite of improving insulin sensitivity, is kind of, well, not kind of, it is one of these issues found in pretty much every stress related disease that you can get as you get older. Poor muscle function, poor muscle utilization of glucose and carbohydrates because you're just not, right? They're just not being activated. And your muscle is it's your biggest storehouse for this stuff. So the more muscle you have, the more healthy that utilization is, the less likely you're going to be on this diabetic slide, weight gain slide anyways. Lowers cortisol over time if you train properly. I don't mean just weight training in general. Strength training implies rest intervals, right? You don't strength train and rest for 30 seconds. That's cardio with weights. So proper strength training includes longer rest intervals between hard sets. This lowers cortisol over time through that rebalancing of that activation, sympathetic fight or flight, relaxation, parasympathetic, right? Rest and digest. Activate, work set, longer rest to recovery. You're just retraining that system through your workouts. So that lowers cortisol over time, rebalances that activation, relaxation, balance with that seesaw, like I mentioned. So this is really your fat loss engine. Strength training is what builds it and protects it. So if you've had a lot of dieting history over time and not protected your muscle, it gets harder and harder to lose fat each time because you have less and less metabolic horsepower, if you will, right? Why your nutrition has to change. Same things. It's more stressful. So deep, I said this already. Uh, Your body is more sensitive to deeper calorie deficits, longer fat loss phases. This is, you got to be serious. One of the questions we put on our application is this a season of serious for you or not? Like, don't be a lollygagger. Like if you're gonna lose fat, if you're serious about losing fat, then do it, right? Like if it's not the if not, then don't, because you end up accumulating the consequences of trying but not being consistent and therefore not getting what you're here for, right? You're not getting the results. You're just getting the consequences because you're in a deficit most of the time, just not enough of the time. So longer fat loss phases are deadly. It's just more under eating to your body when your body's more sensitive to under eating. Deeper calorie deficits, more sensitive, more reactive. Biofeedback will change faster. You'll feel worse. Too frequent attempts to diet. So this is not enough time not dieting, not doing nothing, not dieting. So intentionally eating more, eating an appropriate amount for your body. Inconsistent eating patterns. We talked about this one already as well. And then the low carb, I talked about this too, low carb, keto, or intermittent fasting diets. The goal isn't to eat as little as possible. It's to eat as much as possible while still making progress. You feel better. You just feel better. When you actually, anybody that has gone through, or we've taken through, or you've gone through yourself, that has gone through a time of eating an appropriate amount of calories, say maintenance calories, everything improves. You have more energy, you have less cravings, you sleep better, everything, your training is better, like you get stronger, like life is better at maintenance calories. That's where all the magic is. And yet we're inundated with the eat less, eat less, eat less, right? You want to be able to eat as much as possible to lose fat because when you want to maintain, you want to be able to eat as much as possible to maintain. Because if your maintenance calories to maintain, hey, you're great, you look awesome, you got in shape, your maintenance calorie is pathetic. How are you going to keep your fat off? Like it's just not even realistic long term. So it's not a long term plan at all. These are not just unsustainable, they're just not appropriate. Um, Bigger deficits don't speed up fat loss, they just speed up adaptation and resistance for more people. And the resistance becomes, I don't feel like it, right? I have more cravings. I'm not recovered. I don't, when you're in that place, you don't even want to prep. You're tired. It's an effort day. Ah, forget it. Tomorrow, right? That happens too much at that point. That's all part of nervous system, right, dysregulation, too much stress. You don't make good decisions, overwhelm causes you to not care, right? All these things happen at those times. So the common denominator a lot of the times is to turn that down. So structure is a lot of that solution. Um, Okay, enough protein, obviously. Everybody says this now, right? So we know all this stuff, right? We know all this stuff. Enough protein, enough calories, enough carbohydrates. We don't necessarily all say that, but that's the truth. Enough fiber. There's being more said about that, which is good. Consistent eating patterns, which means meal timing as much as you can control. Have the structure put in place. Here's my perfect day. These are the times of days I'd eat, and then be flexible with it when you need to, when you know you need to, and have a stable intake. This is a big one, and this is why you need to have a plan. This is why like our meals over macros approach is good because it's a plan. I had a DM with someone the other day, and they said, "Oh, yesterday I had a good day. I hit X amount of protein, but it was hard." And I'm like, my first thought, you got no plan. You're tracking it every day. No one's going to do that forever. That wears you out. It's too much food stuff in your head all day, tracking all day, chasing the numbers, right? So, um, the benefits of having that plan in place is it allows for a stable intake. And what does a stable intake do for you? Predictability. Your body has a predictable amount of calories coming in. When you are trying to re-regulate this whole system and just, hey, I used to be able to make progress. Right now, I can't. I've kind of moved in the other direction. This is the explanation for it, right? So I didn't talk really about perimenopause and menopause because it's all the same thing, whether it's dieting history or that the explanation, what's happening in the body is essentially the same, except for obviously in menopause, there's just no more sex hormones. But a lot of women are open to HRT these days. But ultimately, the process of what to do is the same, right? So when I worked with competitors back in the day, outside of the walking component, which I didn't know enough about back then, the process for improving somebody's kind of damaged metabolism, what we called it back in the day, is the same as what you would do now. It's not overdoing these things. It's time eating. It's not cutting this or cutting that, right? So stable calorie intake is really, really beneficial. I think this is probably one of the most underappreciated things. Um, is a stable intake. So if it's 1,800 calories a day is your plan, then you stabilize at 1,800 calories, and allow your body to get used to that intake instead of having this calorie cycling flux. You want your body to adapt to that, not adapt to it. Muscle needs fuel, hormones need consistency, and fat loss requires safety, not starvation. So I talked about this. Biofeedback is your guide. So your body gives you real-time clues, updates for how it's doing. So these are the markers to watch. Sleep quality and how fast you fall asleep, mood and irritability, recovery from training. So how long are you sore? Another indicator of poor recovery from training is a regression in strength from last week. In the gym, you should be tracking that, right? You should be logging your workouts if you're serious about your gym time. Energy throughout the day. So we're talking about stability here, no afternoon crash. Hunger patterns, again, stability, predictable, not wildly all over the place. Cravings, same thing, stable, predictable, nothing crazy in the evenings, and good digestion and bowel regularity. So this is green light stuff, right? So when these go red, your body's waving a white flag. Not now, please, not now. It's saying to fat loss, right? Really, not now. When they're green, you're primed for progress. Biofeedback is your body's way of saying, I'm ready or I need a break. So this is huge, right? So in clients, we track this on a weekly basis. So we do our regular check-ins on 2-week basis, but this is a weekly thing because this will tell you right off. This will tell you first, right? This will tell you when a person is in a good state and you should expect good things. You can push even lower calories when this is good, and that's okay because the biofeedback says that we're hormonally stable. We're not reactive. We're responsive. We're not stressed. The moment those things change, this changes quickly. So again, think of your monthly cycle. These things change quickly. These things change really quickly, right? So hormones affect these areas of biofeedback. So when they start to change in response to what you're doing from a programming standpoint, food, nutrition, food, training, sleep, recovery, stress management, whatever, this is the ticket, right? This tells you everything. When this starts to go sour, you need to pull back. It's foot off the gas. It's more focus on recovery. Maybe it's stress management. Maybe it's more attention to sleep. Maybe it's more food. Maybe it's a break from dieting, right? Because ultimately, like I said in the beginning, you can still push through it. You can still lose fat when these things go red, but you'll have a much harder time being consistent with your plan because of all of these things. I don't sleep well. I feel everything's pissing me off. I'm sore all the time. I got no energy in the afternoon. I'm hungry all over the place. The evening cravings are killing me, and my digestion sucks. This doesn't make anybody want to follow a plan at all. You can, but it's unlikely. It's unlikely you're going to be consistent through this. This is the grind, right? So that's when you pull back. And the issue here is that this is what you will find uh, changes I would say earlier now than it would have years ago. And most people aren't even paying attention to these things until they start to pay attention to these things because you're used to whatever you're used to. So if these things are all crappy or are all wherever they're at, that's just it. That's just what I'm used to. I'm used to not sleeping well. Whatever. It just becomes normalized. When you start to track these things, you start to bring more attention to them. You start to bring more awareness to those things. And then you can see how what you're doing from a input side of things affects these things. Because once you start to, for example, if somebody was in a fat loss or calorie deficit environment, once they start to pull out and start raising food and pulling the recovery lever, these things all improve, right? You feel good. I have a client of mine who is feeling like incredible, like absolutely incredible at like 54 years old, right? And not dieting right now. And she's like, summer's coming. I'd like to get a bit leaner. And from my vantage point, totally get it, right? Of course I get it. Um, I said, I just want you to make aware of something that we're kind of in the middle of this process of stabilizing. And this is all the benefits that you've accumulated so far and are experiencing from doing this. In my opinion, it's way too soon to turn directions and potentially lose this just for that short-term outcome, right? And she understood it that way. She was, I'm not willing to risk that right now. I feel just too good, right? So I want to see it through and then we'll go down at the right time, right? So, um, but ultimately, when a lot of these things improve, you don't even realize they've improved or you don't realize how poor these areas of biofeedback might be until they've improved, right? And then you have the comparison component for it. So um, our approach is different. So most plans at this point, they would say push harder, cut calories, do more cardio, get more extreme, so on and so forth, right? We focus on building the environment where your body's more responsive. So we don't push harder across the board. We just push hard in the gym so you get stronger and build muscle, but we pull back in the places that keep you stuck so your body can start to respond again. So the focus is gym time is on building muscle and getting strong, protecting metabolism, reducing stress. We build muscle, we get strong, we protect metabolism, we reduce stress so you can lose fat. So this is what we built Look Like You Train. So it's designed for the stressed, adapted, hormone shifting midlife body, designed to calm your body so it can respond. We have weekly coaching calls with me and Amy. My training is built that it builds muscle strength and metabolism. Uh, we've got over 500 women in the group. And Amy was often teaching, I think we do our lives. So I'll do 1 week and then I'll do a Q&A or something on metabolism or training or, any of those types of topics. And then Amy on the alternate weeks is always doing nutrition stuff and pretty much that meals over macros part or identity work, belief shifting work, personal development type of stuff as well. Education, daily content, identity-based support. So it's $75 a month our group is, or 250 a day. And I can confidently say, I think you'd have a hard time finding another group coaching place that puts as much into their program as we do. We've been doing coaching online. I've been 21 years, 22 years now. Amy's right behind me. And one-on-one was always our main thing. And then when COVID came, we started this group, and this has now become our main thing, right? So we're always in there, and this is kind of our home base and where we put all of our stuff. So I said here, this is really what I would say is a metabolic restoration and long-term fat loss system designed or disguised as a strength training program. So the training is the hub, but it's the hub, right? The training is the hub. That's the programming, and then it's everything else around that that supports kind of that process from a nutrition standpoint, metabolism, education, just so on and so forth. So here's the link for anybody that wants to screenshot that. And I don't know if I have Amy on mute or not, for you not on here anymore, but I think that so the new group will start in if you have any questions, by the way, before I say this, let me just take my screen share off here. If you have any questions about any of this, I'm happy to answer any of them. There's not a lot of people here, obviously, so this will go out to all the replays. So anybody on the replay, you can just shoot me an email. I'm happy to go through any of the information for you. My email is eric@leanbodiesconsulting.com. So, and then if anybody also wanted this these slides, I'd be happy to give them to you as well. So you just got to email me for them, and I will send you the link, and you could have the information here to reference back to. Okay. So it's ERIK, not ERIC. All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I hope you learned something. I hope you got some value out of it. And I hope we get to see you and look like you train with us. So we start June 2nd. We'll start talking about the group like I think tomorrow and whatever the next week or so. But June 2nd is day one. All right.
Can
Okay.
I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, um, if I guess my real question is, how do you treat each person individually? Because we're all different. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but we all have unique systems that need to be fixed. So, how do you, like, how would I know what, for instance, my calorie intake should be versus, obviously someone else is going to be very different based on their physique and, their program or what they do. And then do you work with that person individually to go through a plan and do the check-ins, or is everything a group?
So in Look Like You Train, it's a group format, right? And then we have one-on-one as well. But to answer your first question, so there's there's a theoretical calorie deficit for everybody based on their individual inputs into that equation, right? So there's a whole bunch of more complicated equations. Harris, Benedict, Katz, McCardle, they put in your age, your height, your weight, all these different variables, and they put them together, and it spits out an amount of calories that you should, in theory, eat for maintenance, right?
Right,
So, in theory, that doesn't necessarily mean that's reality for you because of all the reasons I talked about, right? So
right,
when we start with a client, and this is the way all the nutrition templates in the group are set up, we would know all those equations, they average out to about 15 times body weight. So someone who's really metabolically healthy should be able to eat about 15 times their body weight in calories to maintain. Now, we can assume there's going to be maybe some slowdown from X, Y, or Z over time. So we would accept, let's say 14. So let's call it 14 to 15 times body weight should maintain. Even at this point, that's our goal when we do maintain at any body weight, right? So therefore, we also know that let's say 20 to 25% of that below that should in theory be a calorie deficit in theory. So you got to
right.
test it, right? So the first phase is always a deficit test. So 11 times body weight in theory is a
Hmm.
calorie deficit. So it's about
Okay,
10 to 12, let's pick 11. So if somebody was, you know, 150, they would deficit test at 1650, right?
right.
You have to be really consistent at that. After 2, 3 weeks, whatever, you have, if only if you've been consistent enough, right, to
Hmm.
test that stability of calorie intake, you can have three possible outcomes. One, you can be a little bit lighter, which means it is a calorie deficit. Good news.
Right.
Two, nothing could happen, which
Yeah.
means there's a degree of adaptation. Is it maintenance? Wouldn't be a good thing, right? Three, you could gain weight, which would be bad news. That's a major degree of metabolic slowdown, right? But ultimately, the starting point is just a starting point, and then you adjust based on outcome. So at that point, I know if that person's metabolism has a pass or fail for me. Listen, we tested. In theory, listen, this should be 11 times body weight. You should be able to make progress if you're in a good state right now. You're not. So we could lower calories because there is still a calorie deficit that exists for you. We just got to go lower because your maintenance is obviously lower than we thought, lower than theoretical numbers should be. So we can do that, but thinking big picture, should we? Because that's reinforcing the issue that has us going low calories right now, anyways, because we have to go low calories.
Right.
So we could do it, we could grind it out, but we're going to end up with a potentially slower metabolism and a harder time maintaining at the other side. Or should we take a look and really see what that means? Metabolism is slower than it should be. Let's try to eat it up and raise it so that we can then lose fat on a more appropriate intake. So the only thing that is static is the starting point, right? So we deficit test 11 times body weight,
Okay.
bring in compliance to it, and then you know based on outcome of that, what am I good, what should I be doing? Stay the same, up or down.
Okay. And then in the group, do you like the resistance training or the strength training? Do you individualize it or it's just the group in general?
Yeah, so I have a great video on this, but it's the group. So everyone's running the
Okay.
same program. So I would say
Okay.
when the question of individuality comes up, I would ask what makes the program, and it's almost rhetorical because I'll answer it myself. What makes the program individualized? When we look at what is the purpose of the training, our purpose of our training is to build muscle and get stronger. What do we know about that? So we know we need to train a certain degree from failure. We have a certain rep range we want to be in, so on and so forth. So is it exercise selection that makes it individual, where this person's doing a flat dumbbell press, this person's doing an incline dumbbell press? What is the logic behind those different choices for that person? There isn't one, right? So we have movement patterns, right? We know that the chest muscles are adducting and flexing, right? We know certain movements that have more activation in certain muscle groups. And then you have the variability that's going to just come from availability. Some people are in a commercial gym, some people are at home. So it's more so the programming parameters. So if I'm doing, for example, this last program was the 4 day program was an upper lower split, and the 3 day program was still 4 workouts, but 3 days, and they were full body, right? So it was day one, day two, day three, then day four,
Right.
day one, day two. And we had an arm emphasis, a bicep tricep emphasis on this program, right? So that's the programming theme for that round of programming was, um, the loading parameters. We had a warm up of 10, a warm up of 6, and then two hard work sets to failure, let's say, right? That's the programming parameters. So that's not a component you would individualize, right? So when people are
Mhm.
thinking like that, unless someone had kind of an imbalance, I have an imbalance here that I'm trying to work on. But when we look at the overall goal of building strength and building muscle, the individuality component kind of doesn't have an explanation for it really, right? So if you are to say, I need a, let's take shoulders, for example. Shoulder movements are going to be some type of shoulder press, some type of lateral. That could be a dumbbell press, a Smith press, a machine press, a barbell press, a standing press, a push press. They're all a press, right?
Right. Right.
Laterals could be a dumbbell, a cable, a machine. They're all a lateral movement. So the individuality could be which one you're choosing from the movement. I'm more concerned that a person's choosing a press in a
Okay.
press component. So I might say, on this day, pick seated dumbbell press, a military press, a Smith press, a machine press, one of those, pick a press. but we're doing these loading parameters, this rest interval, this tempo for it, so on and so forth, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
But yes, it does. Because I've done personal training, so all that makes sense to me. Um, but what if like I swim, I'm gonna start Pilates? Like, how do you incorporate that when you don't want to give that up either?
What are you trying to do? Where are you? What do you, like, what's the goal?
I'm a bad person. I'm the one that probably you're going to give me a calorie and I'm going to gain weight and that's going to freak me out.
Fair enough.
So I'm somebody that
But do you think you're under eating right now?
um probably,
Probably.
yeah. I heavy load at the end of the day, but I don't keep track. I've tried to keep track on fitness, whatever, but
Yeah,
it just takes way too much time. And I'm like,
exactly.
oh my gosh, like forget it.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
No.
Yeah, no one's going to do that. It's the daily component of that. That's not a plan anyways, and that's not a system that's going to last for anybody either, right? So,
Yeah.
ultimately there has to be some degree of structure that's sustainable for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, everyone's is a little bit different. So when you're looking at a plan, like I don't know if were you on Amy's last night?
Yes.
So that's structure. And when you look at it through the lens,
Right.
like everybody has, like we all have meals on repeat and rotation in our families, right? So they're already sustainable for us and the ones that no one's eating different meals 365 days a year, right? There's
Right.
rotation. Those are obviously sustainable, otherwise we wouldn't be choosing them. That's how you need to look at food this way too, right?
Yeah.
You could build effective meals that serve both goals, and that's just a system of eating. It's the structure around the whole thing that makes the difference, right? And just having
Yeah.
say, hey, I'm eating at X, Y, and Z. And from a training standpoint, like when you talk about Pilates, and yeah, those are great things. I guess it would say, like you'd have to see about. It's kind of like when people talk to me about cardio. What about cardio? Isn't it good for your heart? And I'm like, it absolutely is. Well, then, but why do you say not to do it during this? I'm like, well, because you're not working on that. You're working on this. It's a
Okay.
different season you're in right now. If someone's in a maintenance life and they're not trying to change, they're in more of a, I'm just trying to be healthy, strong, fit, enjoy my fitness. That's different than someone who's actively I'm literally trying to change my body. There's
Yeah.
a way to do that. And there's a way to optimize that.
Mhm. Okay.
Pilates
Yeah,
is great. You
because
know what I mean? Those things are great things too. It all
right,
comes down to what can I recover from, right? So when you're adding more output, you need to make sure your input's not as low as you're suggesting it is.
right, right. And, you know, my goal is I'm 65 and talk about belly fat. I look like I can be pregnant and I'm like, I'm not eating that much and I'm working out a lot. So why do I look that way?
Yeah.
And it only goes there.
Yeah.
And I know I have slowed my metabolism and I'm like, I don't know if it'll ever recover.
Well,
But
it can definitely
this
improve.
is this between last night and tonight, all of it makes sense. I read a lot on all of that stuff. It all makes sense. It's like, okay, can I be that committed? It's
Right.
like, will it really, really change? And how long does it take?
Well, that's the thing. The how long does it take part is very finish line focused, right? Like I use it as an analogy of a wedding date versus a marriage.
Hmm.
So if you're doing it forever, how long does what take? Well, when we say how long does it take, that means when do I get to stop?
Yeah.
You don't.
Okay. Well, I guess my real thing is when will my metabolism like stabilize or get back to quote unquote what's right for my body?
Yeah, it
And
depends.
I know it's going to take time. And it's like,
Yep.
okay, like,
What's the alternative?
no, I know that's what worries me is there isn't a good alternative because I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, which
Are
is
you lifting?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So that's good.
right,
Regularly?
yes.
Are you getting stronger?
Um, I'm
You You're not sure,
Probably the answer is I'm not 100% sure because I know that I don't fuel properly like after.
right? And the weights aren't going up,
Some, but not
right?
a lot.
Okay.
No,
So
no.
that should be a regular thing happening in your gym time is strength gains all the time. That's how you know your training is working
Okay.
by the production of strength. That means you're recovering from your workouts adequately and the programming behind that process is working for you. We see like I mean I wish I had more of our girls on here, but they know this content already so much. I think Susan, you're there. Um, uh, but there's strong women in the group because we train for strength and the programming is built around that. So you see
Okay.
the actual impact on that. Those things are really what starts to change people's body more than always trying to think less, 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 or calories, calories, or fat loss, fat loss. That metabolism is just kind of on the weaker side. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Okay.
um, training for strength, and it's not like it has to be a lot of commitment, 3 times a week, you're training for an hour. The walking is really important. So you can appreciate just my explanation for the belly fat. That's just the fact
Yes.
that that would show high stress, poor insulin sensitivity. So developing insulin resistance, that's what that fat comes from, that hormonal combination, right?
Mhm.
So blood sugar instability is going to be connected with that. So that's just kind of that's the classic thing. That's the classic, but it's not the only thing that you would have noticed. Like I said at the beginning, there's multiple symptoms when you recognize that's not the only thing I noticed was belly fat, right? There might be some energy, there might be whatever, but it's the one that we gets the attention obviously the most.
Right, 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 right. No, there's a lot on that circle,
Yeah.
but thank you. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, my
So,
pleasure. My pleasure.
um, thank you very much.
You got it. You got it. Okay, what is the average number of months someone is in the program? So look like you train is pretty wild actually. So we have people that come in for 12 weeks. It's not for that person, honestly. That's really the opposite. That's the opposite person that is who the group is for because this, like we were just talking about here, it takes time. It's like if you had a major car accident, you wouldn't, you don't, it takes time to repair that car, and everyone is on a spectrum of degree for this, right? So some people are more responsive and some people take more time. It don't, there's like the question asked, the physiology is different. So the path is similar, but the specific details become a little bit different, right? So you also have a person, the actual person's contribution. Everybody wants to think they're going to be given 100%, but in reality, one, it's not necessary to give 100%, but two, people struggle with consistency, right? Like that's what people struggle with the most is being consistent with even having a good plan. So we're in the way of ourselves. So that is a variable that contributes to the time question. But we routinely have over 500 women in the group. It's 550 to 600 the last probably year, and I would say honestly, I mean, I wish I knew the numbers. I'm sure Amy probably has some data on this, but most of the women are in there for a long time. I have women there that have been
We
there since day
we've got
one.
about 85% retention. We're a long community. This is a community of women that,
Yeah,
we want to we thrive on becoming our best version. So there's really an involvement of just maybe this year you're working on being consistent with nutrition, the next year you're working on something else.
yeah. So
Okay.
most of and because everyone does well, right? So you start to see like a lot of people they don't go to the gym and when you start to track your strength and you start to see yourself getting stronger and you also realize what getting stronger means at this point in your life for your body it can be pretty exciting. It adds a new dimension to your whole fitness life is just getting addicted to getting strong and you have the data proof, the proof right there in your tracking. So that is a expectation that everybody should have is to get a lot stronger over the course of time, right? So, number of months is really hard to say. I would say the average is, I wish I knew the average, but the average would be well over a year, that's for sure. Um, Well, I don't know about this one, Aim. I don't know what the 1 month giveaway is about. So you'd have to ask, you have to talk about that one.
Okay, I thought Amy mentioned it, but I could have misheard yesterday about a.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'll be announcing that in the group. I've got a list of everyone that came on tonight, so we'll announce who wins the 12-week scholarship.
Oh, okay.
1 month at three.
No, it'll be 12 weeks, not one
Yeah,
month.
3 months.
Yeah,
Oh,
3 months.
Full
Yeah.
ride in group. So uh,
Ooh.
yeah, we had the last time we did that, we had a woman that came in and won, and she ended up staying in the group.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Stayed in. Like, yeah, I'm staying.
Yeah, I
They
kind of
got,
assumed, like, I know it's forever, I know it's a lifestyle, but just in my mind, like a year of just consistency. I've already been, changing habits and making
yeah,
improvements, and I see my strength go up every week, pretty much.
that's
So I
great.
think it's more like the accountability
Yeah.
and support with the changes.
I like to say a year to people, honestly, because we want to take you through all the seasons. We want to teach you to master Christmas and, master summertime, and every holiday season comes with its challenges.
Yes, yes. And travel is a tough one for me when I'm in another country. Like in America, it's easy, but some places where you're not familiar with things and there's no, grocery store convenient, and you have to figure things out all over again every time you go somewhere. It can be a challenge.
That's definitely a lot. That's definitely a challenge, you know. But then you end up developing travel systems for yourself
Yes, yeah,
that kind of that there's an underwriting that there, there's certain things that I'm consistently, doing on travel or whatever, the consistent allowances or the rules change, right? Because of there's certain things that are no longer realistic. So you got to change what on plan looks like in those situations. We've always distinguished, and Amy probably said it yesterday, but there's a difference between technically on plan and behaviorally on plan. You can be technically off plan, but still making behaviorally great choices in the situation. This is the
right,
best I can do given what I am finding myself in, right? The circumstance.
right.
So, at that point, you may not be as able to control the what, but you can always control like the how much. And that's
Hmm.
just intentional eating, right? We teach that, like even with clients that actually they're just like sergeants when it comes to compliance. They never cheat. I'm like, you have to. You have to go for dinner or something. You have to learn how to do this properly to learn to trust yourself in off-plan situations where you have to just visually choose, right?
Hmm.
How much to eat or listen to your fullness cues as opposed to saying, I have a set plan. You're not going to be on a set plan forever like that.
Right.
Eating out and traveling is realistic, right? You can't just lose every time that happens. So there's a system that can be developed there too, right? And
Right.
practiced.
Right.
Just it's like making promises and just like setting up some realistic promises to yourself that you end up keeping. Then
Hmm.
you realize, okay, I can do this. And each time it gets a little bit more mojo behind it, right?
Hmm.
And the confidence comes, and then the worry of those situations of them, listen, you're not necessarily optimizing your progress in those situations, but you can certainly not regress.
Right. Right.
You could be practicing the maintenance life at that point, which is super important because that's where you want to spend most of the time anyways. Ultimately, who wants to be in a deficit forever? We want
Right.
to in, get out, and be done with it,
Hmm.
right? So,
Is this doable at home? I have weights up to 50 pounds.
yeah. So here's the thing. 50 pounds might be good for you now, but it won't be forever. Like you will get stronger. Like you will need more weight. There's just no two ways about it, right? So for your current level of strength may be sufficient, right? But ultimately, everybody, when they start training for strength, gets stronger. And then it becomes addicting and you want to get stronger. So Amy always says you want to look at like the gym as your life sport, right? Like this is the one I'm trying to get good at. This is the one that's going to pay me off over time, keep me functional, keep me strong, keep me feeling good, help me look good, keep my muscle mass, everything. All the good things that training represents can still be done long term, right? So it's not something that, like we're looking to minimize and try to do the minimal with. We're trying to do as much as we can with it, right? So I would guarantee that over time that you would blow past 50 pound a limit on your weights, right? Which you'd want to. You'd be excited about it. And it's not a lot of weight, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Thank you.
got it. Okay. Okay, there's Susan. I can attest to what Eric is saying. All right, ladies. Like I said, anybody who wants any of those slides that wants to just have that material for me, you can just email me. I'll actually write my email in here quickly if you don't already have it, but maybe everybody
And
does.
we'll announce and email out the winner of the 12 weeks. And then, like I said last night, Eric and Amy, I mean, Eric and myself, we're always, open. I know two of you emailed me from last night. I'll be following up tomorrow, but any questions you have for either of us, you
Oh,
can
we love
always
this
shoot
stuff.
us an email.
Just ask.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What's that
Thank you so
question you're
much.
asking?
Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for the question, Ann.
So you
Sure.
like cars?
I do. I love cars. I love cars.
All right. Well, it's always good to like something, have a passion.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay.
All right. Good
Thank
night,
you.
ladies.
All right.
Good night.
We'll see you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.